Case 1, Lucas Dillon, 2015. The dispatcher's voice crackles through the radio. Unresponsive child, 5 years old, Whitwell residence. When investigators push open the door, unlocked like every other door on that street, they step into a scene that doesn't belong in a place like this. Blood arcs sweep across the walls in perfect, terrible patterns. Cast-off spatter. The kind that comes from something heavy swinging through the air again and again. A baseball bat lies near the body of 5-year-old Lucas Dillon. His small frame is still. The walls around him tell the story before anyone has to speak. Whitwell, Tennessee, population barely 3,000. The kind of town where neighbors wave, where kids ride bikes until the streetlights flicker on, where doors stay unlocked because nothing bad ever happens here. Until it does. The forensic team photographs every angle. A bloodstain pattern expert later testifies. Cast-off occurs when a heavy object sweeps through the air and flings blood in an arc. You count the swings. You see the story. 1 arc, 2, 3, maybe more. Each one a moment of choice. Each one a swing that could have stopped but didn't. The medical examiner's report is clinical, cold. Depressed skull fractures, multiple impact sites, bone caved inward. No fall, no accident. Translation: someone struck this child with enough force to collapse his skull, and they did it more than once. The caregiver that day was Renee Rutledge. At first, her story is simple. He fell off the couch. But when the injuries don't match, when the fractures are too severe, the blood patterns too deliberate, the story shifts. He ran into a wall. Investigators press. The walls in that house don't have the damage a running child would leave. They have arcs. They have cast-off. They have the unmistakable signature of violence. Then, silence. Holly stops talking. Her attorney steps in. The investigation moves forward without her cooperation, but the evidence doesn't need her words. The blood speaks. The bat speaks. Lucas's broken skull speaks. In April of 2017, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation hands down an indictment: first-degree murder and aggravated child abuse. The state is going for the hardest charge they can: premeditated, intentional. The kind of murder that carries life behind bars. But juries are unpredictable, especially in small counties where everyone knows everyone. In June of 2017, a Marion County jury hears the case. They see the photos. They hear the medical examiner. They listen to the prosecutor lay out the timeline, the changing stories, the forensic proof. And when they deliberate, they come back with a split decision. Not guilty of first-degree murder. Guilty of reckless homicide, a Class D felony carrying 2 to 12 years. Guilty of aggravated assault, a Class C felony carrying 3 to 15 years. The courtroom exhales, some in relief, some in rage. Reckless homicide, not murder. The legal distinction is intent. First-degree murder requires proof that the killer planned it, thought about it, decided to do it. Reckless homicide, that's when someone acts with reckless disregard for human life, when they don't necessarily mean to kill, but they do something so dangerous that death is the obvious result. The prosecutor's voice cuts through the murmur. You don't accidentally swing a bat more than once. On August 8, 2017, Judge Thomas Rusty Graham hands down the sentence. 4 years for reckless homicide, 6 years for aggravated assault, consecutive, 10 years total. Renee Rutledge is led out of the courtroom in cuffs. She'll serve her time in the Tennessee Department of Correction. Her earliest possible release date is still years away. But here's the thing about reckless homicide versus first-degree murder. It's not just about the sentence length. It's about what the state has to prove. In Tennessee, under Title 39, Chapter 13, Section 215, reckless homicide is a momentary loss of control, a flash of rage, A split-second decision that spirals into death. First-degree murder? That's cold. That's calculated. That's a decision made and followed through. The jury in Marion County saw a woman who lost control. The prosecutor saw a woman who swung a bat, saw the damage and swung again. The forensic evidence showed multiple impacts. The law met somewhere in the middle, and Lucas Dillon's life became a legal distinction. Juries in rural counties often wrestle with this. They know the defendant. They know the family. They want to believe it was a mistake, a moment of madness, not the cold machinery of murder. And so convictions on lesser charges become a compromise, a way to hold someone accountable without branding them a killer for life. Holly Renee Rutledge remains in custody. The Tennessee Department of Correction records confirm it. No early release, no parole granted. She's serving every day of that 10-year sentence, and the earliest possible release date hasn't arrived yet. Lucas's family waits. The community of Whitwell tries to move on, but the blood arcs on those walls are still in the evidence photos. The cast-off patterns are still in the forensic files. The story is still being told, one swing at a time. Before we go deeper, if this story already has you thinking, hit that subscribe button. You're about to hear 9 more cases that'll shake you. Don't miss them. Case 2. Destiny Oliver, 2019. September 14, 2019. Fountain City, a quiet neighborhood on the north side of Knoxville, Tennessee. The 911 call comes in at 8:47 p.m. A woman's voice, breathless, panicked. "My daughter's been shot by an intruder. Please, you have to send someone now." Dispatch sends units immediately. Shots fired, child victim, possible armed suspect still in the area. Patrol cars roll hot through the streets, lights cutting through the evening dark. When officers arrive at the home on Merchants Drive, they find Rebecca Howington standing outside, frantic, pointing toward the house. "She's inside, please. An intruder came in and shot her." Inside, they find 5-year-old Destiny Oliver on the couch. A bullet wound to her chest, blood pooling beneath her small body. Paramedics work fast, but it's already too late. Destiny is pronounced dead at the scene. Robin tells the story again. An intruder. A man, she thinks. She heard the shot, ran to Destiny, found her bleeding. The man must have fled. Officers canvass the area. No signs of forced entry. No witnesses reporting a fleeing suspect. No footprints. No shell casings outside. Nothing. Then the neighbor's security camera footage comes in. 8:32 p.m., 15 minutes before the 911 call. Rebecca Howington walks out of her front door. Not frantic, not running. Calm, methodical. She's holding something in her hand. She walks to the bushes at the side of the house, crouches down, and tucks a 9mm handgun into the foliage. Then she stands, brushes off her hands, and walks back inside. 8:47 p.m., the call to 911. Detectives rewind the footage, watch it again. There's no intruder, no shadowy figure running from the house, just Robin, just the gun, just the lie. They retrieve the weapon from the bushes, a 9mm semi-automatic. Registered to Robin Howington, 1 round missing from the magazine. The ballistics report comes back days later, and it tells a story Robin never wanted told. The bullet entered Destiny's right hand first, defensive wound, possibly from raising her hand toward her mother. It passed through her palm, struck the TV remote she was holding, and then entered her chest, tearing through her lung and heart. The trajectory is clear. The shooter was standing inside the home, facing the couch. No external shot, no intruder, no accident. Robin is arrested and charged with reckless homicide, 2 counts of aggravated child neglect, evidence tampering, attempted evidence tampering, and filing a false report. Prosecutors later add felony murder, a charge that applies when someone dies during the commission of another felony. In this case, aggravated child abuse. The trial drags on for years. Delays, motions, COVID disruptions. Finally, in March of 2024, a Knox County jury hears the case. They see the surveillance footage. They hear the ballistics expert explain the bullet's path. They listen to the 911 call, knowing now that the woman on that recording is lying with every word. The jury deliberates. When they return, the verdict is clear. Guilty on all counts except felony murder. The state couldn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Robin intended to commit child abuse before the shooting, so that charge falls. But the rest, guilty. Reckless homicide, aggravated child neglect, tampering, false report, every lie, every attempt to cover it up, every moment she let her daughter bleed out on that couch while pretending someone else did it, guilty. On April 19, 2024, Judge Stephen Sword hands down the sentence, 22 years in the Tennessee Department of Correction. Under Tennessee Code annotated Section 40-35-501, violent offenders must serve at least 85% of their sentence before they're eligible for release. That means Robin Howington will serve a minimum of 18.7 years. No early parole. No good behavior discount, 85% non-negotiable. Destiny's family sits in the courtroom silent. 22 years won't bring her back, no sentence will. But here's the policy question that haunts this case. Tennessee has no general child access prevention law. In some states, if a child gets hold of a gun and someone dies, the owner faces automatic criminal liability for failing to secure that firearm. Not in Tennessee. Parents and caregivers are only charged under existing neglect statutes, after the fact, after the damage is done. Advocacy groups have pushed for safe storage laws. Lock boxes, trigger locks, mandatory separation of firearms and ammunition in homes with children. But opponents argue it infringes on Second Amendment rights, that responsible gun owners shouldn't be punished for the actions of a few. So where's the line? When does a failure to secure a weapon cross into criminal neglect? In Robin Howington's case, the gun wasn't accessed by Destiny, it was used on her. But in other cases, children find guns in nightstands, glove compartments, purses. They play with them, they shoot siblings, friends, themselves. And Tennessee law responds with neglect charges, case by case, death by death, instead of a blanket prevention mandate. Destiny Oliver was 5 years old. She liked cartoons. She was holding a TV remote when she died. The gun that killed her was legally owned, easily accessed, and hidden in the bushes while her mother dialed 911 and lied. The surveillance footage doesn't lie. The ballistics don't lie. The jury didn't buy the story. But Destiny is still gone. And Tennessee still has no law requiring that gun to have been locked away in the first place. Pause for a second. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or state in the comments. Let's see how far these stories reach. Case 3. Paris Clark-Wilcox, 2020. July 9, 2020. Antioch, a working-class suburb southeast of Nashville. Metro police receive a call from an apartment complex on Bell Road. A child isn't breathing. Paramedics arrive first, rushing up the stairs to Unit 214. The door is open. Inside, the air is thick with something acrid, stale. The kind of smell that clings to your clothes long after you leave. 3-year-old Paris Clark-Wilcox is lying on a bare mattress in the back bedroom. No sheets, no blanket. Her small body is cold to the touch. Paramedics check for a pulse, check her airway, begin compressions, but they already know. She's been gone for hours. Officers step inside and immediately catalog what they see. Drug paraphernalia scattered across the coffee table. Needles, burnt spoons, baggies with white residue. empty pill bottles with someone else's name on the label, trash piled in the corners, no food in the fridge. The apartment looks less like a home and more like a trap house, a place where people come to use, not to live. Certainly not a place to raise a child. Prestina Clark-Wilcox, Paris's mother, is on the couch, glassy-eyed, slow to respond. Officers ask her what happened. She says Paris was fine last night. She put her to bed. When she checked on her this morning, she wasn't breathing. She didn't call 911 right away because she wasn't sure what to do. Hours passed. Paris lay there, alone, while her mother moved through a haze. The medical examiner's office takes Paris's body. The autopsy is conducted the next day. Cause of death, acute fentanyl intoxication. A 3-year-old child poisoned by one of the deadliest drugs on the streets today. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid, 50 times stronger than heroin, 100 times stronger than morphine. The Drug Enforcement Administration estimates that a lethal dose for an adult is around 2 milligrams, an amount that would fit on the tip of a pencil. For a toddler? Even less. A trace amount, a residue on a countertop, a pill left within reach, a baggie that looks like candy. In homes where fentanyl is used or sold, the drug doesn't stay contained. It gets into the air. It settles on surfaces. Children crawl on floors where powder has spilled. They put their hands in their mouths. They touch everything. And in a place like Prestina's apartment, where drugs were everywhere, Paris didn't stand a chance. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation steps in. Detectives interview neighbors. They all say the same thing. They saw Paris outside alone, sometimes at night. They heard yelling. They saw people coming and going at odd hours, people who didn't live there. Some neighbors called the Department of Children's Services. Some didn't because they'd called before and nothing changed. There's no documented record of DCS removing Paris from that apartment. No open case, no intervention, just reports that went into a system stretched too thin to act. In April of 2021, the Davidson County Grand Jury hands down an indictment. Prestina Clark-Wilcox is charged with first-degree murder, aggravated child neglect, and aggravated child endangerment. First-degree murder in a case like this is a statement. You created the environment that killed this child. You knew the danger. You did it anyway. That's murder. But first-degree murder is hard to prove. It requires intent. Proof that Prestina wanted Paris dead or knew her actions would kill her. Defense attorneys argue that addiction clouds judgment, that she didn't intend for her daughter to ingest fentanyl, that this was a tragic accident born of illness, not malice. The case drags on. Prestina sits in jail, unable to make bond. Prosecutors and defense attorneys negotiate. In June of 2022, a plea deal is reached. Prestina pleads guilty to criminally negligent homicide, a lesser charge that acknowledges she failed to perceive a substantial risk that her conduct would cause Paris's death. Not murder. Negligence. She's sentenced to 8 years in the Tennessee Department of Correction. 8 years. Paris was 3. The plea deal closes the case, but it reopens a larger conversation. Paris's death is not unique. Across Tennessee, our children are dying in homes saturated with drugs. Fentanyl overdoses among toddlers and young children have spiked in the last 5 years. The public perception is that overdoses happen to users, adults who make a choice, who know the risk. But children like Paris don't choose. They're born into it. They live in it, and they die in it. The Department of Children's Services is Tennessee's frontline defense for kids in dangerous homes. But DCS is overwhelmed. Caseloads average 30 to 40 children per worker, double the national recommendation. Staff turnover is over 20% annually. Investigators are burning out, quitting, leaving positions unfilled. When a neighbor calls in a report, it goes into a queue, it gets triaged. High-risk cases, imminent danger, visible injuries get priority. Everything else waits, and sometimes, by the time someone knocks on the door, it's too late. Neighbors reported Pristina's apartment. They saw the signs. They made the calls. But there's no record of DCS removing Paris before she died. Maybe the calls weren't flagged as urgent. Maybe the investigator was handling 40 other cases. Maybe they knocked and no one answered. The system isn't designed to catch every child before they fall through the cracks. And Paris fell. Fentanyl's infiltration into family homes is a crisis the public is only beginning to understand. It's not just dealers and users anymore, it's parents. It's apartments where children sleep feet away from drugs that could kill them with a single touch. It's a 3-year-old girl who never had a chance because the people who were supposed to protect her were too high to notice she was dying. Prestina Clark-Wilcox is serving her sentence. She'll be eligible for parole in a few years depending on behavior and credits. Paris doesn't get parole. She doesn't get a second chance. She's in a grave in Davidson County, another name on a growing list of children poisoned by a drug epidemic that shows no signs of slowing. When fentanyl deaths make the news, the victims are usually adults. Overdoses in parking lots, in public bathrooms, in cars on the side of the highway. But for every headline, there are children like Paris. Silent casualties in homes no one checked on in time, in a system too overwhelmed to save them all. The question isn't whether Prestina is guilty. She pleaded guilty. The question is how many more children are living in homes just like hers right now? How many neighbors are calling DCS and getting no response? How many toddlers are crawling across floors dusted with poison while the system tries to catch up? Paris Clark-Wilcox was 3 years old. She should be in kindergarten by now. Instead, she's a case number, a plea deal, and a reminder that some doors stay unlocked. Not because people trust their neighbors, but because no one is inside who's capable of locking them. Case 4. Nicholas Crowder, 2021. February 9, 2021. Portland, Tennessee, a small city in Sumner County about 30 miles north of Nashville. A probation officer makes a routine home visit to check on Tiffany Spears, a woman on supervised probation for a prior drug offense. The visit is scheduled. The probation officer has been here before. Standard check-in. Make sure she's compliant. Make sure she's not using. Make sure she's staying out of trouble. The officer pulls up to the address, a duplex on a quiet street. He knocks. No answer. He knocks again. Still nothing. He peers through the front window. The blinds are drawn, but there's a gap. Inside, he sees something that makes his pulse spike. A toddler, maybe 2 or 3 years old, wandering alone. No adult in sight. The child is stumbling, disoriented. Something is wrong. He calls out. No response. He tries the door. Locked. He radios for backup and makes a decision. He can't wait. He moves to a side window, forces it open, and climbs inside. The smell hits him first. Death has a smell. Anyone who's been in law enforcement long enough knows it. It's sweet and rotten at the same time, unmistakable. The officer moves through the apartment, calling out. The toddler, a little girl, stares at him silent. She's rail-thin. Her lips are cracked. Her eyes are sunken. Severe dehydration. He finds Tiffany Spears in the back bedroom. She's on the floor, unresponsive. No pulse. Her skin is cold, mottled. She's been dead for days. Near her, strapped into a car seat in the corner of the room, is 15-month-old Nicholas Crowder. He's not moving. The officer rushes over, checks for signs of life. Nothing. The baby is gone. Paramedics arrive minutes later. They confirm what the officer already knows. Tiffany and Nicholas are both deceased. The little girl, Nicholas's older sister, is rushed to the hospital. She's severely dehydrated, malnourished, but alive. Barely. The medical examiner's office takes the bodies. The autopsy on Tiffany Spears comes back first. acute methamphetamine and fentanyl toxicity. Manner of death, accidental overdose. Toxicology shows lethal levels of both drugs in her system. She likely died within minutes of ingesting the combination. Her heart couldn't handle it. One moment she was alive and the next she wasn't. Fast, final. But Nicholas? His death was anything but fast. The autopsy report on 15-month-old Nicholas Crowder is devastating. Cause of death, starvation and hypertonic dehydration. Time frame, multiple days. He was strapped into a car seat, still buckled in when the probation officer found him. He couldn't get out. He couldn't reach for food or water. He couldn't crawl to his mother. He was trapped. The medical examiner estimates Nicholas survived for at least 3 to 4 days after his mother died, maybe longer. His body showed signs of extreme dehydration. His organs were shutting down. His blood thickening. His small body consuming itself in a desperate attempt to survive. He would have cried at first, screamed maybe, but toddlers can only cry for so long before their bodies give out. Eventually, the crying stops. The body goes quiet, and then it's over. His older sister survived because she could walk. She could move around the apartment, try to find water, try to find food. She didn't understand her mother was dead. She just knew no one was helping her. And she wandered alone until that probation officer looked through the window and saw her. Here's the thing that makes this case different from every other case in this video. No one was charged. There is no defendant. Tiffany Spears is dead. She didn't intend to kill her son. She didn't even know she was going to die. The overdose was ruled accidental. And because she's gone, there's no one to hold accountable. No trial, no verdict, no sentence. Just 2 bodies, one traumatized survivor and a system trying to figure out what went wrong. So the question becomes, when there's no one to charge, is there accountability? The probation officer was doing his job. He was checking in on Tiffany as required. But probation officers in Tennessee aren't mandated child welfare investigators. Their job is to monitor compliance with court-ordered conditions, drug tests, employment checks, curfews. They're not trained to assess home safety for children. They're not required to check on kids unless child welfare is a specific condition of probation. And even then, their visits are scheduled. If Tiffany had answered the door, if the apartment had looked fine from the outside, the officer would have checked his box and left. He wouldn't have known Nicholas was strapped in a car seat in the back room, slowly dying. The Department of Children's Services is Tennessee's child protection agency, but DCS oversight is reactive, not proactive. They respond to reports, abuse, neglect, dangerous conditions, but someone has to make that report first. A teacher, a doctor, a neighbor. Without a report, DCS doesn't show up. And if a mother is using drugs alone in her apartment, if she's keeping her kids inside, if no one sees the warning signs, DCS never gets the call. There's no record of DCS involvement in Tiffany Spears' home before Nicholas died. No open case, no prior removals. Either no one reported concerns or reports were made and triaged as lower priority, lost in the flood of cases already overwhelming a system that's critically understaffed. Tennessee's DCS is in crisis. Caseloads average 30 to 40 children per investigator, double the recommended standard. Staff turnover hovers around 22% annually. Investigators are burning out faster than the state can hire replacements. Vacancies sit unfilled for months. The workers who stay are drowning, triaging emergencies, trying to keep the most at-risk kids alive while knowing that dozens of others are waiting in the queue, hoping their case gets reviewed before it's too late. Welfare checks are gaps in the system. Probation officers visit offenders, not families. DCS investigators respond to reports, not hunches. Pediatricians see kids at checkups, but only if parents bring them in. Teachers see kids at school. But Nicholas was 15 months old. He wasn't in school. He wasn't in daycare. He was home, with a mother battling addiction, and no one outside that apartment knew he was in danger until he was already gone. The surviving toddler was placed in foster care. She's alive because she could walk, because a probation officer happened to look through a window at the right moment. If he'd come a day later, she might be dead too. If he'd knocked and left when no one answered, Nicholas's body might have sat there for weeks. This case doesn't have a villain. It doesn't have a trial or a sentence or a moment of justice where a judge hands down years behind bars. It has a dead mother, a dead baby, a traumatized child, and a system full of holes that no one has figured out how to patch. Tiffany Spears made choices. She used drugs. She overdosed. She left her children vulnerable. But she didn't choose to die. She didn't strap Nicholas in that car seat knowing she wouldn't be alive to unbuckle him. And yet Nicholas is still dead, and no one is paying for it. When there's no one left to charge, accountability falls on the system itself, on probation protocols that don't include child welfare checks, on DCS policies that wait for reports instead of conducting proactive visits, on a staffing crisis that leaves investigators too overwhelmed to follow up, on a society that treats addiction as a personal failure instead of a public health emergency that kills parents and leaves children to starve in the aftermath. Nicholas Crowder was 15 months old. He died slowly, alone, strapped in a car seat, waiting for a mother who would never wake up. The system didn't save him because the system didn't know he needed saving. And the probation officer who found him will carry that image, the silent baby, the wandering toddler, the smell of death in a locked apartment, for the rest of his life. If you're still here, you're one of the real ones. These stories are hard to hear, but they need to be told. Smash that like button if you think these kids deserve justice and a voice. Case 5. Crystal Renee Dawn Poore, 2014, mid-2014. A tip comes into the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, a multi-agency operation that tracks digital trails of child exploitation across the country. The tip is specific: an IP address in Tennessee, upload activity, file signatures that match known child sexual abuse material. The kind of content that triggers automatic flags in cloud storage systems and email servers in any digital space where these images try to hide. The ICAC task force forwards the tip to Knox County Police. Detectives in the cybercrimes unit start pulling threads, IP logs, account information, metadata embedded in files, timestamps, device IDs, geographic tags. The digital breadcrumbs lead investigators to a rural address outside Knoxville. The name attached to the account: Crystal Renee Dawn Poore. A warrant is drafted, approved, executed. When investigators knock on the door, Poore answers. She's calm at first, cooperative even. She lets them inside. They seize her computer, her phone, external hard drives, tablets, anything with a storage chip. Within hours, forensic examiners begin pulling data. What they find is worse than they anticipated. Crystal Poore didn't just possess child sexual abuse material, she produced it. The victims were her own daughters, 2, 6, and 8 years old. The files are cataloged, videos, images, hundreds of them. Poore recorded her daughters in explicit sexual acts. She stored the files in cloud backups. She attempted to distribute them online. Every file has metadata, date stamps, device information, GPS coordinates. There's no ambiguity, no plausible deniability. The digital evidence is immutable. It doesn't forget. It doesn't lie. Federal agents step in. Child sexual abuse material that crosses state lines or involves digital distribution falls under federal jurisdiction. Specifically, Title 18 United States Code, Section 2251, Sexual Exploitation of Children. The statute is unforgiving. Production of child pornography carries a mandatory minimum of 15 years in federal prison. maximum of 30. And in federal court, there is no parole. You serve your sentence day for day minus a small amount of good time credit. In July of 2014, less than 2 months after the initial tip, Crystal Renee Dawn Poore enters a plea. Guilty on 3 counts of production of child pornography, 1 count for each daughter. Each count represents a separate victim, a separate set of files, a separate betrayal. The plea deal bypasses trial, sparing the children from testifying, sparing a jury from viewing the evidence, but it doesn't spare Poore from the consequences. On November 10, 2014, she stands before United States District Judge J. Ronnie Greer in federal court in Greenville, Tennessee. The sentencing guidelines are calculated. 3 victims. Victims under the age of 12, an aggravating factor. The defendant is the parent, another aggravating factor. Distribution attempt, another. The guidelines recommend decades. Judge Greer hands down the sentence, 27 years in federal prison, no parole. When she finishes that sentence, if she lives that long, she will be placed on lifetime supervised release. Lifetime registration as a sex offender. Lifetime restrictions on where she can live, work, and go. She will never be anonymous again. The daughters are removed from her custody. Their names are sealed. Their faces are never shown. They are placed with family members, with foster care, with people who will try to undo the damage their mother did. But here's the thing about digital abuse that makes it different from every other kind of harm. It never ends. When a child is physically abused, the scars may last a lifetime, but the abuse itself stops when the abuser is removed. When a child is neglected, the trauma lingers, but the danger ends when they're placed in a safe home. But when a child is sexually exploited and that exploitation is recorded, the abuse becomes permanent. The images don't go away, they circulate, they get copied, uploaded, traded, sold. They live on servers in countries with no extradition treaties. They resurface on forums, on encrypted apps, on dark web marketplaces. Every time someone views those images, the abuse happens again. Every download is a new violation. The children in those files grow up knowing that somewhere, someone is looking at the worst moments of their childhood. They can't escape it. They can't delete it. It's out there forever, and they have no control over who sees it or when. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children runs a database of known child sexual abuse material. Every image is hashed, given a unique digital fingerprint. When law enforcement seizes devices or scans online platforms, they compare files to the database. If there's a match, they know which victim, which case, which abuser. Poore's daughters are in that database now. Their images are flagged, and every time those images are found on someone else's computer, the girls are notified. Victim impact statements have described it as being violated over and over again by strangers I'll never meet. Contrast that with cases of physical abuse or neglect. Those crimes die with the victim's memory, with the abuser's incarceration, with the passage of time. They're not stored, they're not traded, they don't live forever in a server farm in Eastern Europe. Digital abuse is eternal. It is a crime that doesn't end when the sentence is handed down. Crystal Poore is currently incarcerated in a federal facility. Federal inmates serve at least 85% of their sentence. She won't be eligible for release until at least 2037. By then, her daughters will be adults, 25, 29, 31 years old. They'll have lived more than 2 decades knowing their mother created the worst moments of their lives and sent them out into the world for strangers to consume. There is no rehabilitation for this. There is no redemption arc. There is only time behind bars for Poore, and time stretching forward for her daughters who will spend the rest of their lives knowing that the abuse their mother inflicted is still out there, still circulating, still victimizing them every single day. The Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force continues to operate. They track tips. They pull digital threads. They knock on doors. But for every case they solve, there are thousands more images in circulation, thousands more children being exploited, and thousands more perpetrators who think encryption and anonymity will keep them safe. Crystal Poore thought she could hide behind a screen. She thought the cloud was private. She was wrong. The digital trail led straight to her door, and the evidence was irrefutable. But her daughters, 2, 6, and 8 years old, when their mother turned them into commodities, will carry the weight of those files for the rest of their lives. Real quick, what time is it where you are? Comment below. It's wild to think people all over are hearing these stories at different hours. Case 6. Priscilla Mota Santos Lang, 2022. December 13, 2022. Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Nashville receives 2 children in the emergency department, a 9-month-old infant girl and a 2-year-old boy. The hospital staff takes one look at their condition and immediately calls Metro Police and the Department of Children's Services. These aren't accidental injuries, this is abuse. The infant has skull fractures, multiple impact sites consistent with blunt force trauma. Her head shows swelling, bruising in different stages of healing, old injuries and new ones. The kind of pattern that tells doctors this isn't the first time she's been hurt. A CT scan reveals bleeding on the brain. She's in critical condition and doctors aren't sure if she'll survive. The 2-year-old boy is severely malnourished. His ribs are visible through his skin. His arms and legs are stick-thin. He's covered in bruises, some fresh, some fading to yellow and green. He's lethargic, dehydrated and terrified. When nurses try to touch him, he flinches. When doctors examine him, he doesn't cry. He just stares, silent. That silence is worse than screaming. Both children lived with Priscilla Mota and her partner, Santos Lang, in an apartment in South Nashville. Investigators go to the residence. What they find is a scene of chronic neglect, rotting food, trash piled in corners, no clean clothes, no diapers, no formula, no sign that anyone was caring for these children. The apartment smells like decay. There are no toys, no cribs, no safe place for an infant or toddler to sleep. Mota and Lang are brought in for questioning. Their stories don't match. Mota says the baby fell. Lang says the boy wouldn't eat. Both claim the injuries are accidents, that the kids are clumsy, that they didn't know things were this bad. But the medical evidence doesn't support accidents. Skull fractures from falls look different. Malnutrition doesn't happen in a week. This is prolonged, repeated harm. Detectives pull the children's history, and that's when the case gets even darker. These children were in DCS custody before. In 2021, they were removed from Mota and Lang's care after reports of abuse and neglect. They were placed in foster care. A safety plan was created. Mota and Lang were required to complete parenting classes, submit to drug screenings, attend supervised visitation, and prove they could provide a safe home. The goal, as it almost always is in Tennessee's child welfare system, was reunification. Return the children to their biological parents once the parents demonstrate they're capable of caring for them. Mota and Lang completed some of the requirements. They attended a few classes. They passed a few drug tests. The home was inspected and deemed adequate. And in late 2021 or early 2022, the children were returned. Reunified, case closed, DCS oversight ended. Less than a year later, those same children are back in a hospital with skull fractures and starvation-level malnutrition. In January of 2023, Priscilla Mota and Santos Lang are indicted by a Davidson County grand jury on charges of attempted criminal homicide and aggravated child abuse. The state is arguing that the injuries inflicted on the 9-month-old were so severe, so intentional, that they amount to an attempt to kill her. Aggravated child abuse carries up to 25 years. Attempted criminal homicide can carry even more. The case moves slowly through the courts, motions, continuances, plea negotiations. The children are placed in foster care again, this time with a directive that they will not be returned to Mota or Lang under any circumstances. In 2024, Priscilla Mota accepts a plea deal. She pleads guilty to a reduced charge, aggravated child endangerment. It's a lesser charge than attempted murder, but it's still a serious felony. On sentencing day, a Davidson County judge hands down 12 years in the Tennessee Department of Correction. Mota will serve at least 85% of that sentence under Tennessee's violent offender statute, just over 10 years minimum before she's eligible for release. Santos Lang's case is still pending as of the most recent court records. He has not taken a plea. His trial date has been continued multiple times. The children he helped brutalize are growing up without him, and whether he ever sees the inside of a courtroom or takes a deal remains an open question. But this case isn't just about two abusers. It's about a system that gave those children back. Tennessee's Department of Children's Services operates under a philosophy called family preservation. The idea is sound. When possible, keep families together. Provide services, support, and oversight to parents so they can safely care for their children. Remove kids only as a last resort, and when you do remove them, work toward reunification. The federal government incentivizes this model. States receive funding based on how quickly they reunify families and how few children remain in long-term foster care. But the reality is messier than the policy. DCS caseworkers in Tennessee are drowning. Investigative reports from the Tennessean and other outlets have documented a system in crisis. Caseloads average between 30 and 40 children per worker, double the national recommendation of 15 to 18. Vacancy rates hover around 22%, meaning more than 1 in 5 DCS positions are unfilled at any given time. Workers are burning out within 2 years. The ones who stay are overwhelmed, triaging emergencies, trying to keep the highest-risk kids alive while dozens of other cases sit in the queue, waiting for someone to have time to follow up. When a judge orders reunification, DCS is supposed to monitor the family. Regular home visits, ongoing assessments, check-ins to make sure the parents are following through on their commitments. But when workers are juggling 40 cases, those check-ins become sporadic. A home visit that should happen weekly happens monthly. A follow-up that should happen monthly happens once a quarter, or not at all. And so children are returned to homes that look adequate on paper. Parenting class completed, check. Drug test passed, check. Apartment inspected, check. But where nothing has fundamentally changed. The same people who hurt those kids are still the same people. And without consistent oversight, the abuse resumes. Reunifications in practice are often rubber-stamped. Family court judges rely on DCS recommendations. If DCS says the parents have completed their plan and the home is safe, the judge usually signs off. The judge doesn't have time to dig deeper. They're handling dozens of cases a day. The caseworker doesn't have time to dig deeper. They're managing 40 other kids. And so the child goes home, the case is closed, and everyone hopes for the best. For Mota and Lang's children, the best didn't happen. Within months of reunification, they were beaten, starved, and nearly killed. The 9-month-old survived, but with injuries that may affect her for the rest of her life. The 2-year-old survived, but the trauma of starvation and chronic abuse doesn't just go away. Both children are in foster care now, and the system that failed them once will have to try to put the pieces back together. Tennessee isn't unique. Child welfare systems across the country are understaffed, underfunded, and overwhelmed. But Tennessee's crisis is particularly acute. Legislative reports show that DCS has struggled for years to retain workers, close cases in a timely manner, and maintain safe caseloads. Reforms have been proposed: hire more investigators, increase pay, reduce caseloads, improve training. But implementation is slow, and the kids who need help can't wait. Priscilla Mota is serving 12 years. Santos Lang's case is pending. The children they abused are alive, but their childhoods are gone. And somewhere in Tennessee right now, there's another child who was removed, reunified, and is living in a home where the abuse has started again, waiting for someone with 40 other cases to notice before it's too late. Case 7, Clifford Dotson, 2012. May 2012. Roane County, Tennessee. A rural area west of Knoxville where trailers dot the hillsides and neighbors live far enough apart that what happens behind closed doors stays hidden. A welfare check is called in. Someone hasn't seen the Dotson family in a while, and there are children in that home. When deputies arrive at the trailer, they knock. No answer. They knock again. Finally, the door opens. Inside, they find 2-year-old Clifford Dotson. He weighs 12 pounds. 12 pounds. The average weight of a 3-month-old infant. Clifford is 2 years old. He should weigh between 25 and 30 pounds. He is half that. Less than half. His skin hangs loose over his bones. His eyes are sunken deep into his skull. His ribs are visible, each one pressing against paper-thin skin. He is barely clothed, just a diaper, soiled and unchanged. He is strapped into a car seat in the corner of the trailer, unable to move, unable to reach for anything, unable to cry out loud enough for anyone outside to hear. The trailer is filthy, trash piled in every corner. The smell of rot and waste so thick it clings to the deputies' uniforms. But here's the thing that makes this case even more incomprehensible. There is food in the house, canned goods in the cabinets, bread on the counter. A refrigerator with milk, eggs, sandwich meat. Enough to feed a family, enough to keep a 2-year-old alive. Clifford didn't starve because there was no food. He starved because no one fed him. Paramedics rush him to the hospital, but it's too late. His body has been deprived for so long that his organs are failing. He is severely dehydrated, malnourished to the point of organ shutdown. Doctors try to stabilize him, but his little body can't recover. Clifford Dotson dies shortly after arrival. Cause of death: starvation and neglect. His parents are Amanda and Matthew Dotson. Investigators interview them separately. Amanda says Matthew was in charge. Matthew says Amanda was the mother. It was her job. Both admit they saw Clifford wasting away. Both admit they didn't take him to a doctor. Both admit they kept him in that car seat, away from their other children, away from food, away from any chance of survival. There is an older sibling in the home, a boy named Luke. He is malnourished too, but not to the same degree. He was allowed to move around, to eat scraps, to survive. But Clifford? Clifford was isolated, confined, left to die slowly in a corner while his parents went about their lives. The charges come down fast: first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, aggravated child neglect. The state of Tennessee is not treating this as an accident or a failure to provide care. They are treating it as murder, intentional, prolonged, calculated. Amanda Dotson takes a plea deal. She pleads guilty to facilitation of first-degree murder and aggravated child neglect. Facilitation means she helped make the murder possible. She knew what was happening. She participated, but she wasn't the primary actor. In exchange for her plea, she is sentenced to 40 years in the Tennessee Department of Correction. No possibility of parole for decades. She will be an old woman when she gets out, if she gets out. Matthew Dotson does not take a plea. He goes to trial. In February of 2019, a Roane County jury hears the case. They see the photos of Clifford, his skeletal frame, his sunken eyes, the car seat he was strapped into. They hear from the medical examiner who explains that starvation is not quick. It takes weeks, even months of chronic deprivation. The body begins to consume itself. Muscle breaks down, organs shut down, the brain slows. The child becomes too weak to cry, too weak to move, too weak to do anything but wait for death. The defense argues that Matthew didn't intend to kill Clifford. That he neglected him, yes, but neglect is not murder. Murder requires intent. But the prosecution argues something different. In Tennessee, you don't have to intend to kill someone to be guilty of first-degree murder. Under the felony murder rule, if someone dies during the commission of certain felonies like aggravated child abuse or aggravated child neglect, that death is automatically first-degree murder. You don't have to prove the defendant wanted the victim dead. You only have to prove they committed the underlying felony and that the victim died as a result. The jury deliberates. When they return, the verdict is clear. Guilty of first-degree felony murder, guilty of aggravated child abuse, guilty of aggravated child neglect. Matthew Dotson is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He will die behind bars. But the case doesn't end there. Matthew appeals. His attorneys argue that starvation as a method of killing doesn't fit the traditional definition of felony murder. Felony murder usually involves deaths that occur during violent crimes, a robbery gone wrong, an assault that turns fatal. Starvation, they argue, is passive. It's a failure to act, not an action itself. It shouldn't qualify as the kind of abuse that triggers felony murder. The Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals disagrees. In their opinion, in State v. Dotson, the court affirms Matthew's conviction. They rule that starvation is a valid method of murder, that withholding food from a helpless child, confining them, and watching them waste away over weeks or months is not passive, it is active violence. It is a choice made every single day. Every time Matthew walked past that car seat, every time he ate a meal and didn't give Clifford a bite, every time he saw those bones pressing through skin and did nothing. Those were choices, and those choices killed Clifford. The ruling is a landmark. It expands Tennessee's legal definition of abuse to include prolonged deprivation. It recognizes that violence doesn't always look like a fist or a weapon. Sometimes violence is a locked door, a withheld meal, a child left to starve while food sits 10 feet away. Chronic deprivation doesn't make headlines the way a shooting does. It doesn't have the shock value of a beating or a stabbing. It happens slowly, quietly, behind closed doors. But the suffering is just as real. The death is just as final. And the law, thanks to cases like State v. Dotson, now has language to capture it. Starvation is violence. Violence is murder. And in Tennessee, if you starve a child to death, you will be charged, convicted, and sentenced as a murderer. Matthew Dotson is serving life without parole. Amanda Dotson is serving 40 years. Clifford Dotson is in a grave, 2 years old, 12 pounds, a boy who died surrounded by food he was never allowed to eat. We're halfway through and it only gets heavier. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. These aren't just stories, they're warnings, they're proof. Don't let them fade. Case 8, Natalie, 2010, June 15, 2010, Nashville, Tennessee. A mother's scream cuts through the morning quiet. 4-month-old Natalie isn't breathing. 911 is called. Paramedics arrive within minutes, but there's nothing they can do. The baby is cold, unresponsive. She's been gone for hours. The scene looks like every parent's nightmare. Natalie is in her crib, lying on her stomach. There are blankets, a soft bumper pad, a stuffed animal near her head. The mother, Zohal Sakwal, is hysterical, inconsolable. She says she put Natalie down for the night, and when she checked on her in the morning, she wasn't breathing. She doesn't know what happened. She didn't hear anything. The baby just stopped breathing. Metro Nashville police respond. They walk through the scene. The crib setup isn't ideal. Too many soft objects, blankets that could obstruct an infant's airway, but it's not unusual. Thousands of parents make the same mistakes, not realizing that what looks cozy can be deadly for a baby who can't lift their head or roll over yet. The medical examiner conducts an autopsy. No signs of trauma, no broken bones, no bruises. Toxicology comes back clean. Cause of death, undetermined. Manner of death, accidental suffocation or sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS. It's the diagnosis given when there's no clear explanation, when an otherwise healthy baby dies in their sleep and the evidence doesn't point to anything specific. It's a tragedy. It's unexplained. And it's closed. Zohal Sakwal buries her daughter. Friends and family grieve with her. The case file goes into storage. Life moves on. But for Zohal, the secret doesn't. January 31st, 2020, nearly 10 years after Natalie's death. Zohal Sakwal picks up the phone and calls Metro Nashville police. She tells the dispatcher she needs to confess to something she did a long time ago. The dispatcher asks what she's confessing to. Zohal's voice is steady, calm, almost detached. I killed my daughter. Detectives bring her in for an interview. She sits across from them and tells a story that contradicts everything in the case file from 2010. Natalie didn't die from SIDS. She didn't accidentally suffocate in her crib. Zohal killed her. She put a plastic bag over Natalie's head and held it there until the baby stopped breathing. Then she removed the bag, staged the scene to look like an accidental death, and destroyed the evidence. She called 911 hours later, pretending she'd just found her daughter unresponsive. Detectives ask why. Why now? Why, after 10 years of living with this, does she decide to confess? Zohal doesn't give a clear answer. Guilt, maybe. A need to unburden herself. A psychological break. The interview is recorded, documented. She signs a statement. She knows what she's admitting to. On March 23, 2020, Zohal Sakwal is arrested and charged with first-degree murder, evidence tampering, and filing a false report. Her bond is set at $200,000. She's taken into custody, and the case that was closed a decade ago is suddenly reopened. But here's the problem. The physical evidence is gone. The crib was dismantled and discarded years ago. The blankets were thrown away. The plastic bag Zohal claims she used was destroyed. The autopsy from 2010 found no trauma. No signs of asphyxiation beyond what might be consistent with accidental suffocation. There are no witnesses, no forensic proof, just a confession, and confessions, even detailed ones, can be challenged in court. Defense attorneys will argue that Zohal is mentally unstable, that she's confessing to a crime she didn't commit out of guilt or delusion. Without physical evidence, without a way to corroborate her story, the case becomes her word against a 10-year-old autopsy report that found no signs of homicide. But here's the bigger question this case raises. If Natalie died today, would the investigation be different? In 2010, sudden, unexplained infant death investigations, sweetie, were inconsistent. Some jurisdictions had protocols, others didn't. Scene documentation varied. Some investigators took photos and measurements. Others just talked to the parents and moved on. Autopsies for infant deaths were thorough in some counties, cursory in others. If there were no obvious signs of trauma, if the scene looked like a typical crib death, the case was often closed as SIDS or accidental suffocation. But since 2010, sweetie protocols have evolved. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, in partnership with law enforcement and medical examiners, developed standardized investigation practices. Now, when an infant is found dead, investigators use doll reenactments, placing a doll in the exact position the baby was found, photographing it from every angle, measuring distances between objects. They document everything: the type of mattress, the firmness, the presence of blankets, pillows, bumpers, toys. They interview parents separately, recording their statements, looking for inconsistencies. Medical examiners conduct more detailed autopsies. They look for petechiae, tiny red spots in the eyes or on the face that can indicate asphyxiation. They examine the airway for obstructions. They take tissue samples, run toxicology, and document every finding with the understanding that what looks like SIDS today might be questioned tomorrow. In 2020 and beyond, Natalie's death might not have been closed as quickly. Investigators might have pressed harder on scene inconsistencies. They might have separated Zohal from other family members during interviews, looking for cracks in her story. The autopsy might have flagged subtle findings that in 2010 were overlooked or deemed inconclusive. But we'll never know. The evidence is gone. The scene is gone. Natalie's body was buried a decade ago, and Zohal's confession, as detailed as it is, stands alone. As of the last available records, Zohal Sakwal's case is working its way through the Davidson County court system. Prosecutors are building a case around her confession, arguing that her knowledge of details not publicly released, specific actions she took, the timeline, the method, proves her guilt. The defense is preparing to argue that a confession without corroborating evidence is not enough for a murder conviction. But for Natalie, none of it matters. She was 4 months old. She never got to crawl or walk or say her first word. She died in 2010, and for a decade her death was labeled an accident. Now it's labeled murder, but the label doesn't bring her back. It doesn't undo the 10 years her family spent believing she died of natural causes. It doesn't erase the knowledge that if her mother is telling the truth, Natalie's last moments were spent suffocating under a plastic bag, held there by the person who was supposed to protect her. Forensic science evolves, protocols improve, investigators get better at catching what they missed before. But for cases like Natalie's, cases closed before the systems improved, the only hope for justice is a confession. And sometimes, 10 years later, that's exactly what comes. Case 9. The Bain Family, 2012. April 27, 2012. Whiteville, Tennessee. A small town in Hardeman County, population barely 1,600. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where crime is rare and where families feel safe. Joanne Bain lives here with her 4 daughters. Adrienne, 14. Alexandria, 12. Kylia, 8. And the youngest, still in elementary school. Joanne is recently separated from her husband, trying to rebuild her life, trying to keep her girls safe and stable. She trusts her neighbors. She trusts her friends. And she trusts Adam Mays, a man she's known for years, a family friend who's always been around, always helpful, always a little too interested in her daughters. April 27th is the last day Joanne and Adrienne are seen alive. When family members can't reach Joanne, they call for a welfare check. Police arrive at the home. The door is unlocked. Inside, the scene is wrong. Joanne's purse is still there, her phone, her car. No signs of a struggle, but no signs of the family either. It's as if they vanished. Investigators interview neighbors, friends, anyone who might have seen something. Adam Mays' name comes up. He was seen at Joanne's house that day. He was seen with the girls. He's known to the family, known to the community, but when police try to find him, he's gone. His wife, Teresa Mays, says she doesn't know where he is. His mother, Mary Frances Mays, says the same. But their stories don't add up. There are inconsistencies. nervous glances, a sense that they're hiding something. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation steps in. They dig into Adam Mays' background. What they find is disturbing. He has an obsession with Joanne's daughters, particularly Alexandria and Kylia. There are reports of inappropriate behavior, boundary violations, comments that made people uncomfortable but were dismissed because Adam's always been a little weird. But weird has turned into something far darker. On May 1st, 2012, the TBI issues an Amber Alert. Alexandria Bain, 12 years old, and Kylia Bain, 8 years old, are missing and believed to be in danger. Adam Mays is named as the suspect. The alert goes out across Tennessee, across the South, across the country. Tips start flooding in. The FBI joins the investigation. U.S. Marshals are mobilized. This is no longer just a missing persons case. This is a kidnapping. This is a manhunt. On May 9th, searchers find shallow graves on property connected to Adam Mays in Hardeman County. They uncover 2 bodies, Joanne Bain, Adrian Bain. Both have been shot in the back of the head. Both have been buried like trash, discarded in the dirt, hidden away so Adam Mays could take the 2 younger girls without anyone knowing where the bodies were. The Amber Alert intensifies. If Joanne and Adrian are dead, then Alexandria and Kylia are in immediate mortal danger. Law enforcement believes Adam Mays plans to kill them too. Or worse, that he's taken them somewhere remote, somewhere he can keep them hidden, somewhere no one will find them until it's too late. On May 10th, 2012, 13 days after the Bain family disappeared, a tip comes in. Someone recognizes Adam Mays in Union County, Mississippi, just across the Tennessee border. He's hiding in a wooded area, living rough, keeping the girls with him. FBI agents and local police converge on the location. They move in quietly, carefully, knowing that if Mays realizes he's cornered, he might kill the girls before they can reach them. Agents close in. They see Mays. They see Alexandria and Kylia, alive. Malnourished, terrified, but alive. Agents shout for Mays to surrender. He doesn't. He pulls a gun. But he doesn't point it at the agents. He doesn't point it at the girls. He points it at himself. 1 shot. Adam Mays dies instantly. Alexandria and Kylia are rescued. The nation exhales. 2 girls saved, 2 girls brought home, but 2 others are dead. Joanne, who trusted the wrong man. Adrian, who never got to finish high school, never got to grow up, never got to escape the man who decided she was disposable. They're buried in shallow graves while their daughters and sisters are held captive. The rescue is a victory and a tragedy all at once. But Adam Mays didn't act alone. His wife, Teresa Mays, is arrested and charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder and 2 counts of especially aggravated kidnapping. Investigators determined that Teresa knew what Adam was planning. She helped him. She was there when Joanne and Adrian were killed. She helped bury the bodies. She lied to police. She did everything she could to help her husband get away with murder and kidnapping. In 2013, Teresa Mays pleads guilty. She is sentenced to 35 years in prison. She will serve every day of that sentence, and when she's released, if she's released, she'll be an old woman. She chose her husband over 2 little girls. She chose complicity over doing the right thing. And now she's paying for it. Adam Mays' mother, Mary Frances Mays, is also arrested. She is charged with especially aggravated kidnapping. Prosecutors argue that she knew where Adam was hiding, that she helped him evade capture, that she provided support and resources while he held Alexandria and Kylia in the woods. She chose her son over those girls. She chose loyalty to a murderer over the lives of 2 children. Mary Frances Mays pleads guilty. She is sentenced to 13.5 years in federal prison. She's served that time, and she's been released. She's free. The girls she helped her son kidnap are not free. They will carry the trauma of those 13 days for the rest of their lives. Alexandria and Kylia survived. They were rescued. They were reunited with their father and their youngest sister. They went through years of therapy, of trying to process what happened, of trying to understand why their mother and oldest sister were killed, why they were taken, why they spent almost 2 weeks in the woods with a man who murdered their family. They were children. They didn't ask for any of this. They just wanted their mom. Joanne Bain never got justice. She got a grave. She got a headstone. She got news coverage that faded after the rescue. Adrienne Bain never got justice either. She was 14 years old. She had her whole life ahead of her. Instead, she got a bullet in the back of the head in a shallow grave in Hardeman County. Adam Mays took the coward's way out. He didn't face trial. He didn't sit in a courtroom and hear the evidence against him. He didn't hear Alexandria and Kylia describe what he did to them. He pulled a trigger and erased himself, leaving everyone else to pick up the pieces. Teresa Mays is still in prison. Mary Frances Mays is free. Alexandria and Kylia are adults now, trying to build lives on the wreckage of their childhood. And Joanne and Adrienne are still in the ground, 2 more names on the list of mothers and daughters who trusted the wrong person. This case was national news in 2012. Amber Alert success story, FBI heroics, 2 girls brought home alive. But behind the headlines there are 2 bodies, 2 graves, and 2 surviving sisters who will spend the rest of their lives asking why. Why their mom? Why their sister? Why them? Take a breath. What's the weather like where you are right now? I know these stories are heavy, but you being here matters. Drop a comment. Case 10. Unnamed newborn, 2011, mid-October 2011, La Follette, Tennessee, a small town in Campbell County, tucked into the Appalachian foothills where poverty runs deep and the opioid crisis hit early and hit hard. A call comes into local police, a tip about a meth house on the edge of town. Neighbors have been complaining about the smell, about people coming and going at all hours, about the kind of activity that everyone knows means drugs but no one wants to confront directly. When officers arrive, they know immediately what they're dealing with. The smell hits them before they even open the door. Chemical, acrid, the unmistakable stench of methamphetamine production. The walls inside are stained yellow-brown, saturated with toxic residue. Meth cooks leave behind more than just drugs. The process contaminates everything: walls, floors, air ducts, furniture. The chemicals seep into porous surfaces and stay there, releasing toxins for months, even years. Living in a place like this is like living inside a poison cloud. Breathing is dangerous. Touching anything is dangerous. And bringing a child into a place like this? Unthinkable. But that's exactly what happened. Officers search the house. In one of the back rooms, they find a black trash bag. It's tied shut, shoved into a corner like garbage waiting to be taken out. One of the officers opens it. Inside, wrapped in bloody blankets, is a newborn baby. A boy. Umbilical cord still attached. He's not breathing. His tiny body is cold, limp, lifeless. He was born in this house, in this toxic, contaminated meth lab, and he never made it out. The medical examiner is called. The baby is taken for autopsy. Cause of death, asphyxiation. The newborn was suffocated shortly after birth, whether it was deliberate, a hand over his mouth, a blanket pressed against his face, or passive, left alone to die without intervention. The result is the same. He took a few breaths in a room saturated with meth residue, and then he stopped breathing. His mother didn't call for help. She didn't take him to a hospital. She wrapped him in blankets, put him in a trash bag, and left him there. That mother is Wanda Cieslak. When investigators question her, the details are sparse, fragmented. She admits to giving birth in the house. She admits she didn't seek medical care, no prenatal visits, no hospital, no midwife, nothing. She was using drugs throughout her pregnancy. She gave birth alone in a meth house, surrounded by chemicals and paraphernalia. And when the baby arrived, she didn't know what to do. Or maybe she did know, and she chose not to do it. She chose to wrap him up and throw him away. In November of 2011, Wanda Cieslak is indicted by a Campbell County grand jury on charges of first-degree murder and aggravated child abuse. First-degree murder because the act of suffocating a newborn, whether active or passive, is intentional. Aggravated child abuse because bringing a baby into the world in a toxic environment, failing to provide any medical care, and then suffocating him constitutes extreme abuse. The charges are serious. The maximum penalties are decades in prison, potentially life. But here's where the story goes dark in a different way. Public records of Wanda Cieslak's conviction are sparse. News coverage from 2011 mentions the indictment, the charges, the horrific discovery of a dead newborn in a trash bag. But after that, silence. No trial coverage, no sentencing reports, no follow-up. The case fades from the public eye, lost in the endless churn of crime stories, replaced by the next tragedy, the next headline, the next dead child. The indictment stands as a testament. Wanda Cieslak was charged. The state of Tennessee said, "This is murder, this is abuse, this will not be ignored." But whether she was convicted, whether she took a plea, whether she served time or is still serving time, those details are buried in court records that are difficult to access in a small county with limited digital archives, in a system that doesn't always make convictions easy to track. What we do know is this: Wanda Cieslak's baby never had a name. He never had a birth certificate. He was never held by anyone who loved him. He was born into a meth house, though, took a few breaths of toxic air and died in a trash bag. He is buried somewhere, maybe in a county cemetery, maybe in a pauper's grave, maybe in a plot marked "Unknown Infant." His mother's addiction killed him before he had a chance to live. This is the part of the opioid crisis no one wants to talk about. The overdose deaths make headlines. The crime stats get reported, but the babies, the ones born addicted, born into toxic homes, born to mothers too high to care and too deep in their addiction to stop, those stories fade. Those babies become statistics if they're counted at all. Meth houses are contaminated crime scenes. The Environmental Protection Agency has guidelines for decontaminating properties used for meth production, because the chemicals are so hazardous that simply living in the space can cause respiratory problems, skin rashes, neurological damage. Children exposed to meth-contaminated environments suffer developmental delays, behavioral issues, and long-term health problems. And newborns? Born directly into that toxic soup, with no immune system, no ability to process the poison they're breathing. They don't stand a chance. Wanda Cieslak gave birth in a place where no child should ever be. She didn't seek prenatal care, maybe because she was afraid of being reported, maybe because she didn't think she needed it, maybe because addiction had stripped away every instinct to protect the life growing inside her. And when her son was born, she didn't call 911. She didn't wrap him up and take him to a fire station where Tennessee's safe haven law would have allowed her to surrender him with no questions asked. She wrapped him in bloody blankets, put him in a trash bag, and left him to be found by police executing a drug raid. Addiction is a disease. It destroys the brain's ability to make rational decisions. It overrides survival instincts, parental instincts, every impulse that says protect your child. But at some point, the disease becomes a choice. At some point, the mother who chooses drugs over prenatal care, who chooses to give birth in a meth house, who chooses to leave her newborn in a trash bag, she is responsible. And the law says so. Wanda Cieslak was indicted, the system responded. But the baby is still dead. And somewhere in Campbell County, Tennessee, there's a tiny grave for a boy who never got a name, never got a chance, and never got justice loud enough to be remembered. Lucas, Destiny, Paris, Nicholas, Natalie, Clifford, Alexandria, Kylia, Adrian, Joanne. A nameless newborn in a black trash bag. 10 children silenced by those sworn to protect them. 10 mothers who should have been tucking them in, reading bedtime stories, kissing scraped knees, not killing them. Not wrapping them in trash bags, not leaving them to starve, not pulling triggers or hiding guns or suffocating them in their sleep. These stories are court records, autopsy reports, forensic truths pulled from case files and indictments. Justice in Tennessee is bound by statutes. Some call it murder, some call it negligence, some call it reckless homicide. But the children are gone, and the questions remain. How many more are out there untold? How many cases closed as accidents, lapses, tragedies when the truth is darker? Every closed file might be a shadowed crime. Every side's ruling might be a confession waiting 10 years to surface. Every accidental overdose might be a baby left to die. If you believe these stories deserve a platform, subscribe and share. This is Crimes Explained. We tell the stories no one else will. Don't look away.